Thank you for tuning in to LA Talk Live, reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we're more than just talk. Stay tuned.
Hi, and welcome to the Book Beat, where we feature authors talking about their latest books and guest experts in the world of writing and publishing. And more than that, we want you to find a good book to read this week. And if you can't find one, consider writing one yourself, because this is a show where we feature authors and guest experts, and we want to give you as much help as we can in writing your book and getting it published. So we have a great show lined up for you today. Our first guest is going to be Antoinette Kuritz, and she is a book developer, a literary publicist, and founder of the La Jolla Writers Conference. And then we have Norma Yeager. She was a pioneer in the women's movement, and her new book is Breaking Down Walls. And then we have Kathy Porter, who will join us in the last segment, and she's a science fiction writer, and she was endorsed by the late Ray Bradbury, who gave her a wonderful endorsement, just loved her work. And her latest book is Earth's Ultimate Conflict. So we're going to get right to Antoinette Kuritz, who's on the phone with us. And let me tell you a little bit about her. Antoinette, are you there?
I'm here, yes.
Good. Well, Antoinette is a book developer, publicist, media coach, author, publishing guru, and founder of the La Jolla Writers Conference, which happens once a year. About this time, one is coming up, I believe, November 1st, right?
That's right.
Right. And you're a former educator and bookseller, and you turned your love of words into a multimedia enterprise, taking writers from inspiration to publication and representing authors from new to New York to New York Times bestsellers. And you've worked with a lot of really interesting people, Carl Reiner, Betty White, Deepak Chopra, and your favorite, Dr. Benjamin Spock. And she's,
you know what?
Yeah.
My bio is so long, but you know what? Let's just get into information to your guest.
I was almost finished. That was the last line. I wasn't going to read the whole thing because I had to cut it down. So yes,
that's okay.
let's get into the end.
They tend to send you too much about me.
Well, that's okay. I always cut it down because, that happens a lot. But one of the things I wanted to ask you is you had some really interesting questions that you sent, and we both know how publishing is changing, right?
Yes, publishing is changing. It's changed dramatically in the last decade, and it's still evolving.
Right. And you said that 80% of Americans, according to a recent survey, feel that they would like to write a book. They have a book in them, but most won't write it. They don't do it. So why is that?
Writing takes discipline. Am I still on with you?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Okay. Writing takes discipline. You have to actually sit in your chair and write. You have to put your pen to the paper, your fingers to the keyboard, and do it. And a lot of people feel they have a story in them, but they just don't make the time. They refuse to say they can't make the time, because I've had friends who worked and raised their children. They had homes and husbands and children to take care of. I had a friend who got up at 4 o'clock every morning and wrote from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m., and then she woke her family up and they all got on with their day.
Right, and we all know about those romance novelists that have like 9 kids, and they're best-selling authors.
Yep. You look at Debbie Maycomber, who now has something like 76 million books in print. She had an old-fashioned manual typewriter on her kitchen table.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's where she wrote amid all the hubbub of raising her kids and taking care of her family.
Wow.
That's where she started out. So when people really feel that they have a story in them, really feel they have something to share, really feel they want to write, they find the time. I have one friend who appropriated the family pantry, moved everything out of the pantry, put a desk in there, put a do not disturb sign on the door several hours a day, and sat in there and wrote.
Yeah.
You just, if you're going to do it, you have to make the time. Mm-hmm. Someone else I know just refuses to watch television. In all the time that would normally go to television, he writes. So,
It's
and
possible.
most writers keep their day job while they're getting started.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying, yeah, I mean, I know people that have turned a closet, practically into an office and then, just a place they can get away, and they just do it. So, but publishing is changing so much. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the best road or the best choice, for people to get published these days?
I think that it depends on your business model. If you do a lot of speaking and you sell a lot of books back of the room, you're going to want to self-publish, because if you self-publish, you make a lot more money on those books. On the other hand, if you're a fiction writer and all you ever want to do is write, you might look for a publisher. And if you don't get a publisher quickly enough, you may put that book up as an ebook. But the key is to know your market and know how you're going to reach that market. Once you've got that down and you write the best book you can possibly write and have it really well edited, you're well along the way. The problem is people tend to skip steps. They'll finish a manuscript and they'll say, my book is done. And I'll say to someone, well, has it been edited? Well, my mother used to be an English teacher,
Right.
and she edited it for me. Not enough. You really have to have your book professionally edited. And you should do 2 or 3 passes through it before you even send it off to an editor.
That is such good advice. I just have to stress, because, we want the book to be readable. And if you go with a mainstream publisher, you and I both know that you are going to get that, a decent editing job. We both know it varies. But editing is such an important part, isn't it?
Oh, it's an imperative.
Yeah.
It's an absolute imperative. And these days, the publishers want a really clean manuscript by the time you get it to them.
Yes, they
don't.
do.
They don't bring you along like they used to.
Exactly.
It used to be you'd have an editor assigned to you who would functionally rewrite the book with you. That does not happen anymore. It's very rare.
That's always
they
a shock.
want a really clean manuscript, almost publication ready.
Right. So there's many options. I mean, I know that at the La Jolla Writers Conference, I know that you still, you do the traditional thing, right? You bring authors together with agents and editors, and that's really good for people that want to get into traditional publishing. Have you expanded that now to include some self-publishing
From
people?
day one. When I started the La Jolla Writers Conference, I said we were going to cover the art, craft, and business of writing. And since 2001, we have always covered all the alternative methods of publication, how to choose the right method of publication for yourself, how to vet vendors who would help you along the way if you happen to be self-publishing. We cover all of that, and we always have, and we've always kept up with the times. When ebooks began to become really popular, we got into ebook publication. We walk people through every step of the publication process so that when you leave the La Jolla Writers Conference, you've got a really good idea of how you want to go about this. We talk about platform building and how to do it, how to use traditional media and online media and social media. We cover everything.
Yeah.
Because you can't be a successful writer anymore unless you understand all of that.
Right. And I was going to, ask you, too, that, we know that when they finish the book, then they do have to get a good editing job. And then after that happens and, they publish it, however they decide to do that, even if they go with a traditional publisher, it's after they get their 2 weeks of sort of, so-so publicity, it always falls back on us, the writers, to publicize our book, doesn't it? So what is the next, how do they get in?
90%, even if you publish with a major publishing house, you are 90% responsible for your own PR and marketing anyway.
Yeah, that's
a
big secret.
A couple of weeks of outreach on your behalf. They send out emails, and then they send out a few books, and that's it. You're done.
That's it. Yeah. To the usual suspects, by the way, and what I call it untargeted publicity. It's not like they're calling up the publicist. Everybody gets a publicist, but it's not like they're calling up and going like, "Hi, did you get that book I sent? What did you think?"
No, they're not doing the follow up. In fact, we're working with a client right now who's with a major publishing house. We needed to find out from his publishing house where they sent to so we could follow up on anything they did send out.
Wow.
And we're still trying to get a list. Still trying to
goodness.
get a list from the major publishing house.
That is a nightmare story. Well, so what is your best advice for getting into the media then?
Excuse me?
What is your best advice, for getting...
The best advice for getting into the media is to offer them content. Don't say, I'm an author and I have a book, because by the time you get to the word author, they've already tuned you out. You call up and you make yourself an expert and authority on a particular topic. If you've written a book about the care and feeding of dogs, you need to have 5 or 6 different topics about dogs you can talk about. If you've written a novel in which there are, where you're talking about international intrigue and travel, know something about travel, know something about intrigue. Offer content, offer tips or advice or knowledge that is going to keep 80% of the viewers or the listeners from turning the dial.
That's such great
advice.
advice.
You offer, media is a barter. Media will put you on if you're providing good information, and then in return, they will give you a plug for your book or whatever it is you're trying to sell. But you're a radio show host. Don't you want good content?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, I'm sure that you probably help people focus their content as well, because most of the stuff that I get that people send for this show is pretty much off target. And Susan Levin, my producer, I kept telling her, we've got to really spell it out for people. The best stuff that we got was from your agency. PRstrategies.com. Yeah, really.
Thank you so much.
Well, you sent us, you know why that was? Because you sent us a paragraph about each author that you wanted us to consider. And people listening, this is what talk show hosts and producers want, and editors also at magazines. You sent us a paragraph about each author that really told us what their subject was, what they did, how they could help people. And a lot of times you sort of wove it into some interesting facts about their background as well. So we could get like this thumbnail snapshot of them. And the people that you pitched to us were very intriguing, but we don't get that focus material most of the time. Don't
you find that a lot of what you get, you just zip right through, slam, bam, gone,
oh, yeah.
It doesn't capture your attention? We actually, at the Illinois Writers Conference, we actually do classes in finding the hooks you can use for media.
Exactly, yeah.
And we take people, it's a workshop. Everybody participates in helping everybody else find their hooks. And, of course, I'm the arbiter of that, or whoever is teaching the class. And then we do another class on media training. We do a class, Media Training 101 is how to approach the media, and Media Training 102 is what to do once you get media.
Right.
Because you need to know. It's not enough to get on the air and say, as I said, I'm an author and I have a book. Nobody cares.
They don't, because everybody's got a book now. That's one of the things, as I always say, like the good thing about self-publishing is that everybody can have a book, and the bad thing about self-publishing is that everybody can have a book. So it's like a business card now.
It really, really is. And it's... you have to think, when you're pitching yourself, you have to think, would I stop? If I was in the middle of getting my kids off to school and making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and running around and everything else, would I stop and listen to the segment I'm pitching? If you wouldn't stop and listen to it, nobody else will.
That's that's a good test. Well, you had an interesting thing, too, because one of your questions was how do you avoid getting swindled? If you're looking at like PODs or all these different options for publishing, how do you find your way through that maze?
I have horror stories. I have an author who came to me. By the time she got to me, she had spent $100,000 getting her trade paperback book published.
Oh my goodness!
And the lines bled into the spine. There were too many words on a page. Somebody had told her to put more words per page so she could cut down the cost of printing by having less pages.
Oh no!
The book was unreadable and could have been cut by 10,000 words. And she had spent $100,000.
Oh my goodness!
Part of the problem with the industry today is that as more and more people began to write books, more and more people hung out their shingles saying they were experts in book shepherding, they were experts in cover design or interior design, or that they could ghostwrite your book for you. And nobody vetted these people. There's no licensing for this. There are publicists and publishers. And I mean, I had another guy, an attorney from Canada, who spent over $300,000 with a woman here in California who, quote unquote, published his book. And then he had to spend money on an attorney to get his rights to his own book back.
What could you possibly get for $300,000? That's just...
Who knows? Who knows? I mean, I laughingly say to colleagues, if I didn't have a conscience, I could retire in a year. Because people out there are so eager to have their books published. Then you have these companies you go to that say, well, for $400, we'll publish your book. And you have a lot of senior citizens buying into that. Wow, it's only $400, my book will be published. First of all, they do really no editing on that book at all. And then they upsell you with packages. They have their gold and their silver and their bronze and their platinum packages.
Yeah.
And all they do is send out flyers and postcards and bookmarks about your book, and it gets you nothing.
Right.
I had an older couple who had spent they'd spent $400 getting their book published and $18,000 on the upsell PR campaign.
Oh, my goodness. That's just...
and it would be one thing if they had sold a lot of books because of it, but it was flyers and postcards and bookmarks that were sent out on their behalf.
And sometimes they send out these really horrible PR releases that nobody reads, and, they go through some service anyway that just bombards people. So you know what, Antoinette, this time goes so fast, and we only have a couple of minutes, but I want you to tell people, first of all, how they can contact you, when the conference is, and then about your services too, like, what you can do for people and how they can get in touch with you.
The conference is coming up November 1st to 3rd. It is considered one of the best. Writer's Digest calls us one of the 84 conferences in the country worth your money, and there are over 1,600. Everybody at the La Jolla Writers Conference donates their time, including us, those of us who organize it.
No one gets paid.
So we keep the cost extremely low.
Wow.
If you go to the website, La Jolla, that's LAJOLLA, for anyone who doesn't live in California, writersconference.com.
Right.
If you go to the website, you'll note that everything, there are 3 meals included in the cost, the 3 keynote dinners. We have New York Times bestselling authors. Our agents and editors do not sit on panels. They actually teach classes, so your work and you get right up close and personal in front of them. We only take 200 people. We cut it off at 200 so that we can keep a 1-to-6 faculty-student ratio. And I have to say, our faculty makes it an exceptional conference. This is our 13th year, and what we do is we pay it forward to aspiring authors. It's good for authors at any stage in their writing, and we cover the art, craft, and business of writing, fiction, and nonfiction.
And I had a friend who went to your conference, and she actually hooked up with Bill Gladstone, and she got a contract. She got a book contract.
Really?
Yes.
Well, Bill is teaching this year. Yep, Bill is teaching this year.
Yeah, so
that's wonderful.
Yeah, so that's why we really wanted to feature you with this, because I know that you do a wonderful job with this. And how about you have a PR agency with Richard, right?
We
with your
do.
husband?
We're Strategies, and we do PR and literary development. We build platforms for people. That's the other thing I want to say to people out there who are aspiring authors. From the minute you get an idea for a book, if you're serious about it, start building your platform. Because these days, everybody wants to know what your platform is.
Right, through social media, right?
Very, very important. Yeah. But that's another whole show.
Right. Well, we want you to come back on the show whenever you'd like. And thank you so much. We've just gotten off to a start today. And
thank you for having us. And that's strategiespr.com and LaJollaWritersConference.com. Yeah. And if anybody has questions about the conference, I'm at 858-467-1978.
Thank you so much, Antoinette Kuritz.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And our next guest, Norma Yeager, actually came through the Kuritz Agency. She was a pioneer in the women's movement when it was not just about abortion rights and birth control, but about total equality for women in every area of life. And Norma is now 83, and she is going to tell us all about what it was like in those days and the fight that women faced here on the Book Beat, here at LA Talk Live. Stay tuned.
Hi, this is Dr. Levi, your fitness doctor, making a personal house call, inviting you to join me Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific for my all-new show, The Dr. Levi Show. Join us as we discuss fitness, health, and well-being, including emotional and spiritual health. So don't forget to tune in to The Dr. Levi Show every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, exclusively on latalklive.com and the Talk Live Broadcast Network. You can also catch us on iTunes, Radio R&B, or watch us on Ustream.tv, or catch us on the Live 365 network, and now on Radio Flag and Stitcher Radio. Reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk.
Hey everybody, it's Miss R&B, and I'm inviting you to come and hang with me every Thursday night at 9 p.m. PST for Perspectives Corner with Rona Roe Bennett on America Talk Live. Hear and see interviews and live performances from some of our favorite celebrities and personalities in entertainment, sports, business, and the wellness industries. We're getting lifted and we're going deep, talking about life and empowering the champion in us all. See you there.
Hi, and welcome back to the Book Beat. And I'm here with Norma Yeager, but I think our engineer, Nez, I think we have to adjust her headset a bit because I'm not sure that she can hear. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear?
No, I can't.
Yeah, okay.
No, I can't.
And you want to move up to your mic there.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Norma came of age in New York in the mid-20th century when even educated women were expected to marry, have children, and keep house. And so Norma went to Bernard Baruch College and the New York Institute of Finance, and then she got married, had children, and deferred to your husband, right? That's what you did in those days.
That's what you did.
And when he failed to provide, she not only stepped up, she stepped out and became a stockbroker. And your new book is Breaking Down the Walls, right? And
Sure.
You did this with 5 kids?
Well, yes, I did. I raised 5 children in all.
Amazing. Well, you were one of the pioneers of the women's movement. And, a lot of women today, it's about abortion, about birth control. They don't really understand what women faced in that era. So tell us, what was it like for a smart, creative woman back in the 40s or the 50s, even the 60s? What was life
Well,
like for them?
we went to school. We graduated to high school, went on, some of us to college. Most of the careers that we had were teachers, nurses, or secretaries. And unless you were educated in those 2 fields, you had no job availability. Today, of course, you have all kinds of job opportunities. But at that time, we couldn't have bank accounts.
Really?
We couldn't take out loans. We couldn't have checking. We couldn't have a credit card. That was beyond even the possibility without the husband's approval. You had to have your husband sign on to everything you were going to do. And if you
Amazing.
were a single woman and you didn't have a husband, you didn't have those things.
That's amazing.
So it was very difficult. And I did not do the women's movement as a movement for women. It's that I felt that I had to have a career because I had to supplement my husband's income. We had difficult times. And so I did not know how to become a secretary, a nurse, or a teacher.
And you probably didn't want to, right?
Well, if I knew how, I would have, because I would have at least earned some money in that field. But I needed to find a career that I was capable of doing and something that I would like to do. And I had to do it for myself. I had to find something that I was going to do well at. And I had an opportunity that opened up to me, and I took it. And without knowing what was in store for me as a woman, I found out.
Well, you picked a field. I mean, not only just, something outside the box, but you picked stock brokerage.
There were
right?
no women stock
I know.
brokers at that time, none at all.
I mean, you picked a
And,
really male-dominated field.
Well, I loved the stock market. I had always gotten involved, not involved personally because we didn't have the money for that, but I would watch it on TV, or I would watch it on the, they used to have the stores fronts where we could see the ticket tapes. And so I would go down with baby carriages and look through the window and watch the ticket tapes.
Wow.
So it was something that I loved to do. I was good in math. It was something of interest to me. And so when an opportunity came along to join a training program where they gave me an opportunity as the first woman to be on their training program.
Wow.
I went through all their training, their tests, everything that they needed to have. And when I passed, my manager said to me, well, we've never hired a woman before. We don't know what to pay you. Well, I was shocked and taken back. I said, what do you mean you don't know what to pay me? What are you paying all the others? Well, they're all men with big expenses for families, for travel. So I have the same expenses. I'm not working for fun. I'm working because I have to support my family. And he looked at me and I said, one more thing I have they don't have. I said, I had to hire a wife. Well, he was so taken back with that. He says, you're right. I never thought of that. You've got it.
Wow. It sounds like they're almost treating you like you're an alien from another planet or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, during the training program, I had to take my turn to be on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. They never had a woman stockbroker be on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange.
What did they think was going to happen? I mean,
Well, the men didn't. No, it was tradition.
Yeah.
Women were not allowed on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. That was, the Navy has the same thing. They didn't allow women on their ships for a long time.
That's true, yeah.
And so we had to fight with the Board of Governors for me to be the first woman permitted to walk on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. And that's the walls I broke down, breaking down the walls of the New York Stock Exchange and the prejudices against women in the marketplace.
And what did that feel like that day when you did that, when you were there?
Well, looking back, of course, now I feel very proud about that. But looking back, it was scary for me. Here I suddenly walk into this huge stock floor with a load of men walking around with papers and cursing and carrying on and so on. And I knew they didn't want me there, so, I was a little coy and shy. And but I learned all about the New York Stock Exchange, what it did, how it worked, and so on, which enabled me years later to open my own firm. Because without that training, you cannot do it. So they put me through a wonderful training program of going through various departments. And wherever I went, they were shocked that I was a female stockbroker. Most people didn't believe it.
There was a thing, wasn't there, where they just would look at a woman. It was kind of like looking at a woman pilot for a long time. Is she really going to fly this 747 or whatever,
That's right.
Same thing, wasn't it?
Well, I had to get clients, and when you get clients, you have to go cold calling from building to building. You have to develop your clients and cold call and so on. And they would laugh. They say, "Oh, come on, you're not a stockbroker.
You must be the secretary for the stockbroker, right?"
No, you must be. You must be selling real estate from your house. I said, "No, I'm not even selling cosmetics. I'm selling stock."
Yeah.
And so it was difficult. Another problem I had is if I wanted to call a client at home, his wife wouldn't believe I'm a stockbroker. So I learned never to call at home to any of the men because it was a difficult time for them.
Women were
to
probably a
believe it.
little suspicious, right?
Exactly.
I have a friend who says that a lot of women kind of went crazy in those days because they really couldn't express themselves. And I know some of us had mothers who were very frustrated for that reason. They either, like my mother was had a career in Hollywood, but then she quit it to have children because that was the thing you were supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And a lot of women, all of a sudden they were housewives, and it was so unsatisfying that they really was very difficult psychologically to handle. Did you know people like that?
Well, I was that kind of a person. I mean, here I had children, and I had to go to work, and I was a homemaker for so many years. I didn't know what I was going to do. It was frustrating. It was depressing. And
but I mean, you weren't fulfilled like washing dishes and
no, I was
know.
not. No, I was not. And the bad part is here you have children, and in order to teach them, you have to feel fulfilled.
Right.
And if you don't, you're not going to have your children have that sense of accomplishment either. Mm-hmm. And so it's important to have a balance, a good balance between the home and the career, because you can't. You have to do both well, and you can't do 100% in either. You have to be able to balance your work, your career, and your home, and that's an important point. That's very, very important for women who go into careers.
So how do you do that? Like today, a woman really can do that, but then the question is, well, how do you do that, right?
Well, like any office, you have to budget. You have to plan your day. You have to budget your time. You have to give your family some time. You have to make sure that you, that you have a means of setting up a calendar for whatever you're going to do. You budget your money so that your family knows what's coming in and going out, and you don't run into debt, because that's the horrible part of going to work. You think you have all this money coming in, you can spend all this money, but that doesn't work. You have to have a budget for it. You also have to have help. Your husband, if you're married, has to help you, because it's a partnership. You're working to help him and bringing the money, and he has to help you. You also have to bring in good help for your children, because when you're working, you can't have your head thinking, where are my children today? What are they doing? And worry about that. Mm-hmm. You have to have a clear head. And you also have to be able to share with your children your calendar and theirs, so they know, what's happening to the family. Because if you leave them out, there's fear for them as well. What's happening to the family.
Well, how did you manage? Really, you see, you broke down all these walls, and you had 5 kids. How did you manage to balance everything in those days? I mean, that's quite a job.
As I said, I had to know where I had to go. My time needed
Just
to
kept
be
track
programmed.
Of all that,
Like anything else, you have a calendar. Here, I have to be here. They have to be there, and so on. And so you're able to plan ahead what really needs to be done that day, day by day, evening by evening.
Really plan it out. So let's talk about your book for a moment. What do you tell the story of the women's movement, or do you tell your personal story? Or I guess the backdrop is of those times and what it was like, right?
The women's movement at that time was not a women's movement. It didn't even have a name, and nobody thought about that. I mean, eventually there were marches for equal pay, and there was marches for the vote, and so on. But I lived a life that I did what I needed to do to help my family, to help my career, and it evolved by breaking down these walls that became the women's movement, the equal pay that I had my manager give
so
me.
So you were sort of out there doing it before there was a movement,
exactly.
Really. So what do you think it was in your temperament that allowed you to do that, whereas so many women were afraid to do that?
Well, the first thing I was afraid of was starving. I did
survival.
Survival. That was the first thing that I needed to do. I had to survive, and my family had to survive. So the first thing I needed was the need to do something. The second thing is to find what I needed to do in which I thought that I could do well. And I was a fighter.
I think that's probably the key, right? You were a fighter, because there were a lot of women who probably needed money and were also, needed maybe their husbands weren't bringing in enough. But it seems to me there was a difference between the women like you. I've always wondered, what was that quality, what was that factor that made you go out and do it, whereas like 10 other women you knew probably could have done it, but they wouldn't do it. They hung back, right?
Well, it is a difficult thing to break walls. You have to be able to have enough confidence in yourself. You have to feel that you have the ambition and the determination to do well. So you have to look within you, and you have to, you had another speaker here at one time, and you have to do for yourself. You can't wait for anybody to do it for you. Just like they say, walk on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. One of the excuses they gave was there are no ladies' rooms. I said, well, I'll take care of that. Don't worry about it. That's my job. And so my book tells these different stories about how I was able to break down these walls. And it's an education to anybody reading the book to look within them and what they can do with their own lives. So it's more a book of education as well.
Well, and what was the biggest challenge that you faced? I know there were a lot, but what was the biggest one? What was the one that you thought that maybe you wouldn't, kind of overcome?
Well, that's a hard one because I was fighting for clients all the time. And one of the things that we were taught was cold calling and going up against people that you didn't know, people that you had no idea what they were interested in, and try to break through to get a client. So fighting for clients was a very difficult part of the
plus,
job.
Cold calling is hard, but plus, I guess in those days, as you said before, you were a woman, so that they didn't even take you seriously when you called, right?
That's right.
Yeah, are you
That's
selling
right.
like Avon or something?
That's right.
Yeah.
They didn't take you seriously, and that's when you have to develop your style. And it takes time to do that. And when I was able to do that, I was able to get clients. I used to work with the secretaries up front because they're the ones that open the doors to their bosses. And I tell in the book how that's done, how you can overcome some of the things that you're afraid of. Walking to a building, cold calling, at that time, that's what we used to do. Don't forget, I did all this in New York. When I came to L.A., which is a automobile city.
Right.
You had to drive to different places. So I had to rely on the telephone, how to break through on the telephone to get somebody's
But you'd actually do it in person in New York?
In New York, you do it in person.
Yeah.
Yes, you had to go from floor to floor and try to meet the people that are there. I walked into Harry Winston, a beautiful shop on Madison Avenue at that time. And I walked in there and I said, I have to speak to the person that's taking care of Mr. Winston's finances. They thought I was crazy.
Right, for a woman to come in and say that. Yeah.
But they laughed and they said, well, just a minute. And they ushered me upstairs, and a woman was handling his finances. So she looked at me and says, oh, I'm so proud of you, a lady stockbroker. She says, I'm going to give you my business. So that's how I opened the door.
So there must have been some really wonderful moments, too.
Oh, I have stories in there. But my book tells a lot of these stories, how I opened the doors and broke down the walls.
Well, let's talk about how people can get your book.
Well, my book is called Breaking Down the Walls by Norma Yeager, spelled properly, Yaeger. And you can be bought on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or any public bookstore.
Right.
And hopefully that they'll find that they can learn a lot for the past, which is history, and the future, which is where we're going, hopefully, for women.
Right. And do you have a website? Or?
I do, and it's normayeager.com, again spelled properly, Yaeger.
We only have about 30 seconds here, but there's a question I really want to ask you.
Yes.
What do you think is the next step for women?
Again, I think the next step for women is to get through this abortion problem and so on and move forward. We have many more women in government, and that's very helpful to keep that going. We have many, many more women as CEOs. And education. Get yourself out there. Educate yourself in the field that you love, and be determined and be proud of yourself, because that's the main thing. You have to think enough about yourself to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Well, our next guest, Kathy Porter, is a science fiction writer, and that's a little rare for women to actually be in that field. There are women in the field, but it's still kind of a man's domain. So I was checking her out on Amazon, and I saw this quote by Ray Bradbury. He said, "I will always keep Earth's Ultimate Conflict," that's her book, "close to my heart." So she's going to join us after the break. Stay tuned. This is the Book Beat here on LA Talk Live, where we're more than just talk.
Hey everyone, this is Richard Carr, Business Relations Manager for LA Talk Live. Did you know social media produces almost double the marketing leads of trade shows, telemarketing, direct mail, or even pay-per-click ads? And that about 46% of all online users count on social media when making that ever-important purchase decision. Hey, if you feel lost when it comes to social media, Top Tier Media can help you. Top Tier Media specializes in social media management and blogger outreach for beauty, fashion, health, and lifestyle brands. To learn more, go to www.toptiermedia.com. That's www.toptiermedia.com. Top Tier Media, the official social media marketing company of LA Talk Live and the Talk Live Broadcast Network.
The American Heart Association's Heart Walk is coming. Bring your family, bring your friends, bring your coworkers. Help yourself and those around you to live longer, healthier lives. Form a team today and walk to help the American Heart Association defeat heart disease and stroke, two of the nation's leading killers. For more information, visit heartwalk.org.
Hi, and welcome back to the Book Beat. I'm Jean-Noel Bassior, and that bumper music, by the way, is by my brother, Rick Fleischman. So thank you, Rick. Just want to give you a plug. Love that music. We have Kathy Porter in studio with us, and she is a science fiction writer. She grew up in Endicott, New York, the birthplace of IBM, and only a short distance away from one of her favorite TV series creators, Rod Serling, where he was raised. By the way, I used to live 2 blocks away from him in Pacific Palisades.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so we have that in common. Kathy's lifelong interest in science fiction ignited when her father, a science teacher, showed her craters on the moon and taught her the constellations. So she grew up watching science fiction movies and TV shows, and Ray Bradbury's Martian Chronicles was the first science fiction novel she read, and she has been hooked ever since. And her latest book is Earth's Ultimate Conflict. It's from the Grey Guardian series. And is this Escape from Noor? Is that?
Escape from Noor
Okay.
is the second in the series.
Is the second? So this is
Yes.
This is Earth's Ultimate
Earth's
Conflict.
Ultimate
That's
Conflict is the
part
one
of-
that's available now.
Okay, great. So, women, there are women science fiction writers now, but they are it's still a kind of a male domain, isn't it?
It is, and many of the science fiction women, not all, but the majority of them are more in the fantasy realm
Yeah.
rather than the science fiction realm.
And what's the difference for our listeners, for our viewers?
Well, when you're dealing with fantasy, you have unicorns and dragons and things of that nature, where science fiction, you either have something based in science or, like I write, with aliens.
Right.
I'm
You
primarily alien sci-fi.
Yes, and you do write about things that we hear about in the news occasionally when there's not a
Yes.
blackout, like the Greys, right?
Right.
The race of Greys that, if you remember the cover of the book Communion, which they pretty much seem to look like that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they were originally drawn by a couple named Betty and Barney Hill.
Yes, tell us about, because I know that couple was abducted, and that was a very interesting case. And
That
that's
was-
what inspired you, right?
Yes, it's one of my greatest inspirations. I was really aware of it when it was everywhere on television. Betty and Barney Hill had been abducted. This is something that biracial
couple.
would really not have wanted to put themselves in the
Right, 'cause that was the
in
1960s,
limelight.
right?
It's 1961.
Yeah.
And they were in New Hampshire on their way home at the time when they were abducted. And because they were everywhere, I mean, it was a media crazy spell that they were going through, and I enjoyed and gobbled up every bit of it. I was very hooked on it and wondered if they were there. And I remember asking my dad, who was the science teacher, and he said, well, I didn't used to believe in them. And that's when I thought, boy, if a science teacher could be convinced that possibly they're out there, I started delving more and more into it and got more involved in reading science fiction. I sort of ended up writing science fiction primarily because I couldn't find what I wanted to read.
Oh, and that's always the best. That's what we say on this show. If you can't find the book you want to read, write it yourself. That's exactly what you did then,
I
right?
did. I woke up one morning. I had this dream, and I started building on it and building on it. It was like this whole story downloaded into my mind. Over a cup of coffee, I talked to my husband about it that Saturday morning. I said, I would love to read that book.
Wow.
And he said, if you want to read it, you've got to write it, and helped me make it a reality.
That's very interesting. I want to ask you about what happened, because, you know, the woman who wrote the Twilight series says the same thing happened to her. She she had a dream and kind of saw or overheard the characters talking. How vivid was this dream? What happened?
It was an extraordinarily vivid dream. It was one of those dreams that haunted me throughout the day. First of all, when I first woke up from it, it was one of those early morning dreams that you sort of lay in bed thinking about and like, why did I dream something like that? And then my imagination started slowly building on it, and then it was as if 1 minute I was thinking about it, and the next minute was like, whoosh, a whole story was in my mind. I was like, oh my goodness, that's where it can go. And I actually thought I was going to write one book. Then I realized as I was writing it was going to be more. I thought maybe 6, but as I finally laid it out, it's a series of 8.
Wow. And did that all come from the one dream, or did you keep having dreams?
No, it all kind of came from the one dream, and the rest of it is just, I don't know any other way to explain it other than I get an idea and it starts downloading, and my characters give me the direction that they want to go.
Your characters tell you kind of who they are and what they want to do, right?
Absolutely. As Stephen King said, once you create a character, don't be a control freak. Let them do what they want to do.
Yeah, I've heard of fiction writers trying to kill off characters, and they go like, I'm not going to die.
Right.
You know, right? So that is your kind of technique. It's very interesting to follow the character.
It's also heartbreaking when one of your characters is going to die.
Oh, yeah.
And it's, I created this character from my imagination, and now it's like, no, I don't want to let you go.
Yeah.
But they have made their decision, and it works with the story.
So you really do give them control. That's, yeah.
It sounds kind of odd, doesn't it? But
well,
you do.
It sounds very creative, quite frankly. That to me is like the co-creative process. It sounds like the right thing to do. You know, so in your book, because it has a very interesting plot from what I could read on Amazon. So there's this epidemic. I want you to tell us about this, but it's called SEAS. What is SEAS?
SEAS epidemic is severe environmental allergy syndrome. People are literally becoming allergic to Earth, the air we're breathing, the things we're eating. As the plot goes along, they have to be removed from their families. They're put in isolation tents so that they can limit their ability to make contact with the public. And they suddenly realize that they have not been, because the SEAS pandemic, as well as increased seismic activity and climate change, we are headed towards what looks like a catastrophe.
And is this Earth in present time or in the future?
It's in the very near future.
Near future.
In the near future. So these women and men that are isolated, and it's primarily women of childbearing age, suddenly realize that they have actually been transformed. And they're going to have to make the gut-wrenching decision of whether to leave Earth with the Greys, who are offering aid.
So the Greys step in, and we should tell us, for people who aren't familiar with, don't listen to Coast AM or whatever, tell us about the Greys. Who are they?
Well, the Greys are, in my book, from a planet called Nur. They were originally Nurians, but they had been mutated by their own scientists, giving them a vaccination, hoping that they would be able to survive the environmental upheaval their planet was going through. However, it mutated them instead. Mm-hmm. And now they are here offering aid to Earth. And in the meantime, President Barbara Unger, a woman president who is looking for salvation for our country and Earth, is also offered salvation from the Guardians, another alien species. We have come to realize that the Greys have been manipulating us, and we don't know what the Guardians' ultimate goal is. So she's going to have to ultimately decide who to trust.
But she's in a desperate situation, right? Because we've got this epidemic raging.
And the climate problems and instability of the Earth's crust.
And they're offering help.
They're offering help. So which of these alien species are we going to go with? Well, right now, the Greys have taken people of childbearing age and young men and older men and women, and have transformed them for life on their planet Nur, and claim, hey, we'll take care of them. We're going to be man's salvation. We can't save your...
So they're lifting them off planet.
We're going to take up to 1 million people. And that is, we think, is what is going to happen. However, these men and women are going to have to make the gut-wrenching decision of whether to leave, and possibly their human families are going to die on our planet, or go to Nur, where they will care for the hybrid children they have discovered that they have covertly given birth to.
So they're kind of building a hybrid race, right?
A hybrid race.
Which some people think is actually going on with abductions, right?
Right.
So you do base...
I base it on a lot of theory that is already out there.
Right, because there are, I mean, for people who are not in this, pay attention to this kind of news, there are actually psychologists these days who work with people who have experienced what they feel are extraterrestrial abductions, and some pretty credible people. Have worked with people who claim to have had contact with Greys, right?
This is correct. And I mean, if you've ever gone to a MUFON meeting, you would be surprised to see that there are astrophysicists, there are doctors, lawyers. It's amazing how many people are of the belief that there are aliens out there, including the Catholic Church, which has in many times been accused of hiding the fact that they have a relationship with the aliens that goes way back.
What's your take on that? Why is the Catholic Church so kind of a bit more upfront than you would expect with that?
Well, I think that perhaps there has been, what is below the Vatican that people are uncovering right now? Perhaps there has been in the past some type of alien relationship, like in the movies they have brought aliens back. They have contacted priests, like in the Fifth Element, to help save Earth in the future. So it could be something of that nature. It could be just the fact that things that have been discovered under the Vatican we don't have any answer to, and so imagination takes place.
Right, right. And I interviewed Dr. Stephen Greer, and he, of course, is for full disclosure of what the government, he's got a bunch of retired CIA people, ex-military. He's assembled a lot of people who have been willing to come forward on video, and he is trying to get full disclosure out there. Do you follow these kinds of things and then base your plots on?
I do follow a lot of it, yes, and I listen to Coast,
yes.
And I a lot of it I take as fact and some of it as theory. I cannot imagine that in all the millions and billions of stars and galaxies out there that we are the only life. It just doesn't seem possible. Equally, I don't believe that if we have contact with aliens in the future, I really don't think they're going to come that vast distance with all that technology to attack and enslave us.
It doesn't seem like an advanced race like that would.
No, it does not seem possible, which goes back to why I originally wrote science fiction, because I was so tired of that same theme. And I was tired of women in science fiction being fair maidens in distress that needed to be rescued, and the macho guys grabbing their big weapons to kill the alien monster that has invaded and destroyed Earth.
So how are your books? That's interesting. So do you tend to have women heroines?
My women are very strong women. They're not fair maidens in distress. They don't need to be rescued. Equally, they're not Michelle Rodriguez or Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Yeah.
Well, because they're wonderful. Don't get me wrong, they're wonderful, but I wanted to deal with how real women would react. They're the ones that have to handle the children. They're the ones that have to get through anything that comes around in our lives, as scary as aliens, and get a family through it. And that's what I wanted to deal with.
That's very interesting, because that does sound like a new kind of science fiction, because a lot of it's kind of goes to extremes. I mean, like Sigourney Weaver's wonderful, like in Alien and everything. I love to see it. I love Michelle Rodriguez. I love to see very, very strong women.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is that if something like this happened, like the scenario you're creating, which is a really interesting one, we'd have a lot of ordinary people trying to cope, right?
It's and basically that's what it's about. Ordinary people dealing with a very extraordinary circumstance and how they would manage it and what they would do to survive or help others get through it.
And it sounds like a really fun book to read, a series to read.
I always say, if especially for women, I mean, it has all the science fiction and science that a sci-fi aficionado would want to read. So a lot of men have read it. But it's a great first science fiction book for women.
And that's interesting, because in science fiction, there's some is really techie and some is not so much techie. So where do you rate yourself? Like about the middle, or?
I guess it's not all techie. No,
Okay.
It's mostly dealing with humanity and alien relationships.
Maybe a little light tech?
A little
or-
light tech, yeah.
So it's not totally devoid of tech.
No,
yeah.
it's not devoid of tech. There's plenty of science in it, but I don't get into the
you're not.
ins and out of the technology. I explain that this is the technology they use, but I don't explain how it works or how it came about. Or
Right, just enough so that,
no nanobots.
Yeah, okay, that's good. No nanobots, folks. If you don't love nanobots, don't worry, not here. So, but it sounds like it does have enough so that the science fiction, it's credible, it's believable.
Right, it's credible, it's believable, and it's exciting. It's a science fiction thriller that is something that'll grip you from the beginning to the end. It's a very excellent and sufficient ending, but Escape from Noor literally picks up the day after Earth's ultimate conflict ends. So it's a continuing series.
So where can people get your book?
Well, it's available on Amazon and on Nook and Kobo and iBooks, almost any
All the different digital
format,
platforms.
all the
yeah.
digital platforms. So it's available online as a digital download, ebook only right now.
Is it on Smashwords as well, or?
No, Book Baby.
Oh, Book Baby.
Book
Okay.
Baby.
Okay, very good. And Amazon for sure, right?
Amazon, yes.
Yeah,
and
very-
it's only $2.99 available for download.
That is just the amazing thing about ebooks. Just think about this, like a good read for $2.99.
Isn't that extraordinary?
Yeah, it's wonderful. So thank you so much for being here.
It's been a pleasure.
Really, really new and interesting stuff. You're the first science fiction writer that we've had on the show. So thank you. Kathy
I'm
Porter. So thanks for joining us, and please come around next week, same time, same station, for the Book Beat. This show is produced by Susan Levin and SpeakerServices.com, and this is the show with homework. So this week, find a good book, or like our guest Kathy Porter, if you can't find one, start writing the book you want to read yourself, right?
Right.
See, it works. See you next week on the Book Beat, and remember, all the shows are archived here at latalklive.com, where we are more than just talk.
We know there are many choices in internet radio, and the staff and host of LA Talk Live would like to thank you for choosing the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.